Guy has elevated the attention and recognition of our community architecture and planning to a real top quality level.
He's the most decorated, award-winning architect, I believe, in our area, or maybe even the state of Florida.
Guy Wesley Peterson was born the day after Christmas, December 26, 1953, in Cheyenne, Wyoming, the middle son of 3 children born to Joan and Wesley Peterson, a brother Andrew, 2 years older, and Matthew, 4 years younger. His father was an MD internist stationed in Cheyenne. Shortly after his birth, the family moved to Sarasota.
He had just gotten out of the Air Force. He was a physician in the Air Force, and I was born at an Air Force base in Cheyenne. And his commitment was complete, and he moved to Sarasota to start a practice.
We moved down here when he was 9 months old. And my husband joined a group to practice internal medicine here. And that's why we came here to Sarasota.
As a physician, his father spent most of his time tending to his patients.
I think he was the 28th physician in Sarasota County when Sarasota Memorial had a 50-bed hospital. They practiced medicine different those days. He would go out and make house calls at night. But he was always there for us.
While his father was busy with his practice, his mother was home to provide her boys with help and transportation.
My mom was the person that took us to our swim meets, took us to our swim practice, went to tennis tournaments, was very active in our lives.
Was always on the tennis court or boating or doing something like that.
As a young boy, Guy and his brothers enjoyed the coastal habitat of the area.
Grew up adjacent to the field club. That was our backyard, so we had a little boat, and this is way before you could drive, and there was no boats on the bay, and we could basically go anywhere we wanted. We had freedom. We'd go downtown and go to the Florida Theater or the Ritz Theater and watch a movie, just hang out, and it was like freedom as a young boy to have that opportunity.
Guy was an avid swimmer, joining the Sarasota Swim Club, which was located at the then Lido Casino on Lido Key.
It was an amazing place. It was a great place to hang out when you're young. In the 4 corners, they had these towers that you could go up into and look out.
Getting to swim practice was a short boat trip across the bay. Guy's parents trusted him to make it safely over and back.
But I have to take my boat to swim practice at Lido, and they had some friends that lived in St. Armand's, so I'd park my boat at their house and then I'd walk to the Lido Casino to swim.
St. Armand's Key was a much quieter place at that time.
There was a gas station on the circle. They had the Elbow Room, which is an old bar. And they had a 5 and dime store. It was a different setup than it is today.
His parents were members of the field club, and he was an active tennis player.
There wasn't really a team. You would just enter tournaments as an individual. The first tournament I ever played in, I drew first round a gentleman named Brian Gottfried. And Brian Gottfried went on to be number 3 in the world in tennis. I lost that match 6-11, 6-11, I remember. But it was a thrill to play him and then to follow his career.
His father was a licensed pilot and frequently would take his boys on adventures through the air.
He owned a number of airplanes, and we would go, just on a weekend, we'd fly down to the Ocean Reef Club in Key Largo and have a hamburger and then fly back. We'd go down to Marco Island to have a hamburger and fly back. And then he would take us on trips. We went, me and my brothers and my dad. We did a lot of father-son trips to the Bahamas to go scuba diving, and he would travel. We'd travel to other places in the airplane. So that was always an adventure for us.
Guy attended his first year of grade school at Alta Vista. The family then moved to their home near the field club, and he transferred to Philippi Shore Elementary.
I'd say he was between a B and an A. He was a good student.
I had a lot of fun, but I think I was I did respectably well.
Guy attended Brookside Junior High School and then went to high school at Riverview. While as a young boy, he did not fully understand the significance of these buildings. Each were designed by architects of the Sarasota School, such as Victor Lundy's Alta Vista, the Zimmerman brothers' Brookside Junior High School, and Paul Rudolph's Riverview High School.
What's interesting for me as an architect is starting in Lundy's building at Alta Vista and then going to the Zimmerman brothers' Brookside Junior High School, which is an amazing steel and brick structure, and then go to Paul Rudolph's Riverview High School. I was kind of very fortunate to be exposed to some very progressive architecture as a young boy.
At Riverview High, Guy joined the swim team and continued to play tennis. Architecture was not a consideration, as Guy's father had plans for him to follow in his footsteps into medicine. Guy focused on his studies.
I knew that if I was going to try and get into medicine someday, that grades meant a lot, and my parents were pretty strict about being studious and doing your homework and pushing us to excel in any way we could.
While he had no consideration of a path other than his father's plan, he was struck by one serendipitous event his senior year in high school. After a tropical storm had come through the area, an ad appeared in the local paper requesting laborers to help clean up a home on Siesta Key.
And it ended up being the house of Sid Solomon, the very respected modernist painter. It was a house designed by a Sarasota school architect, Gene Leedy. It was all concrete with these huge flying cantilevers, towering spaces. And I think I went off to school pre-med, but that was always kind of incubating in my mind that was an amazing experience that I had seeing that house.
Guy graduated from Riverview High School in 1972 and entered the University of Florida that fall in the pre-med program.
I had a roommate in college that was an architecture major, and I would be studying all these advanced sciences and mathematics, and he'd be over there building these little models and having fun. And I think, God, he's having a lot more fun than I am. So I think that had a little bit of a role in it. But I think growing up in Sarasota, I've often said in my career that I wasn't part of the Sarasota School of Architecture, but it was part of me growing up.
He decided to take a class called Introduction to the Building Arts. The rest became history.
Yeah, I just absolutely enjoyed that, thoroughly. And I remember going home after that semester, the end of my first year, sitting down with my parents and saying, I've made a decision that I am going to pursue architecture and not medicine.
While his mother supported his dream, his father was not pleased.
He would say, you don't have the right personality to be an architect. Architect, you might starve with distinction. I remember that resonating in my mind. He sent me clippings from the Wall Street Journal about how difficult it is to make it as an architect. And so he would, he was quietly trying to discourage me, but I think he realized that the train left the station. And I think sometimes when someone says you can't do something or you shouldn't do something, it makes you all the more, eager and committed to doing well, to demonstrate that you made the right decision.
Even then, Guy knew architecture would become his passion.
When I discovered architecture, it changed my life as a student, because all of a sudden I was doing something that I just was incredibly passionate about. And all of a sudden it became easy. It wasn't really work. Like when I was in pre-med, I was taking calculus and physics and chemistry, and they were interesting, but they weren't, exactly something that inspired me.
Guy graduated from the University of Florida in 1976 with a Bachelor of Design and received his Master of Arts in Architecture in 1978. While studying, Guy worked in the summer at the architectural firm of Jim Holliday in Sarasota. Jim became an important mentor to Guy. He wanted him to work for another firm before joining him in Sarasota, and set up an interview with a firm in Phoenix. Meanwhile, Guy heard of another option.
The chairman of the graduate design program, a gentleman named Harry Merritt. Harry was a Harvard grad, and he was the director of the design program at Florida. And I had an opportunity to actually work in his office a little when I was in my last year of graduate school. And Harry was he taught me really how to be an architect. And when I was graduating with my master's, he said there was a firm in Tallahassee that was looking for a new young designer because one of the former Florida students who was doing that had left the firm.
Guy fully expected to take the Phoenix position if offered, but decided to interview in Tallahassee first.
So I thought, well, I'll go to Tallahassee and have this interview just to kind of do a warm-up before I go to Phoenix, because I'd never interviewed for a position in an architectural firm before. And so I went up to Tallahassee, and the firm was Barrett, Daffin & Carlin, a fairly large architecture engineering firm. They had an office in Pensacola too. And the director of architecture was a gentleman named Ivan Johnson. He's 10 years older than I was at the time, but he was the director of the architecture program at Barrett Daffin. And so he spent the entire day with me. It just made me feel very welcome and encouraged. I felt encouraged about an opportunity to go work for this firm. And I said, well, I'm going to Arizona. There's a firm in Phoenix that I'm interviewing with that Jim Holliday had actually set up for me. And I said, after that, if you happen to make me an offer, I will let you know, but I'm not going to make a decision until I go out to Phoenix.
In Phoenix, he was offered the position on the spot. They wanted him to stay and start working immediately, but Guy had just acquired a golden retriever puppy.
I said, well, I have a dog in a kennel back in Gainesville. I can't just stay. I came back. I remember flying back to Gainesville from Arizona, and there was a letter in the mail that I had an offer from Barrett Daffin in Tallahassee.
Guy decided Tallahassee would be the best option.
I got out of graduate school in August, and I started working October 1st.
Shortly after taking the position, he met a young woman who would become an important partner in his personal and professional life.
We met at an architectural firm. I took a part-time job when I was getting ready to graduate my undergraduate degree, and we met at the Coke machine. Back then they had the old Coke machines that they would run through the rack, and we met there.
I saw her going over to the Coke machine, so I went over there and introduced myself. And she thought my name was Dave. And then she found out, I was Guy and Dave was the other guy. But it took me a while to get up the confidence to ask her out. My father always told me, you don't ever date where you work, because if it doesn't work out, it's going to be very uncomfortable.
He wouldn't go out with me until I quit my job because he felt that it was too complicated dating someone in the same office.
But I knew she was only going to be there for the Christmas break because she was filling in for somebody on vacation. So when I got closer to the time I knew she'd be leaving, I asked her out.
Once we went out, our first date, we never stopped seeing each other after our first date.
Guy and Cindy were beginning their relationship, and his job was going well when he received a call from Jim Holliday in Sarasota.
Jim Holliday wanted me to come back to Sarasota and work in his firm. But he said, I want you to get 5 years experience somewhere else before you come back, Guy. And I was at Barrett Daffin Carlin for 9 months when he called me. He said, Guy, I've got this big country club in Naples. I need you back.
Guy moved to Sarasota while Cindy remained in Tallahassee. They began a long-distance relationship that required Guy to drive the long trip to Tallahassee on weekends. Finally, Guy decided it was time to put the road trips to an end.
This one weekend I said, why don't we meet in Gainesville? It's almost halfway. It's 2 hours from Tallahassee, it's 3 hours from Sarasota. So we did, and we stayed at this old kind of cheesy Howard Johnson's. And that's when I popped the question to her.
I think he probably got tired of driving back and forth, so he proposed to me, not the most romantic place, but it was wonderful.
I wish I could have a do-over on that one, but she said yes, so it was a happy ending.
They were married on February 2nd, 1980 at Siesta Key Chapel on Siesta Key. That August, Guy was registered as an architect in Florida and was working with Jim Holliday in Sarasota when he received a proposal from the Tallahassee firm.
Ivan Johnson, who was head of Barrett Daffin Carlin, called me and said he was leaving the firm to start his own practice in Tallahassee. And I just moved back to work with Jim Holliday. And Cindy and I had just gotten married, and we just rented an apartment here in Sarasota. And so I said, well, let's come up and talk about it. So Cindy and I took a week and went up to Tallahassee And while I was there, my former firm, Ernie Daffin, the principal said, since you guys are in town, why don't you come out to our farm and have lunch with us? So we went out there and he offered me Ivan's job, leaving Barrett Daffin. Then I went to dinner with Ivan and his wife Marcy, and they offered me a partnership to start a new practice.
Guy and Cindy struggled with the decision, a secure position or a partnership in an unknown firm.
I was 26 years old, been married just a few months. We had no money, we had no children, we had a beanbag chair, I had an electric guitar, a stereo, and a platform bed. We had nothing. And so we went to Sanibel Island, and we sat down there for 3 days, and I read a book about how to start your own business. And I said, I could go back to work at Barrett Daffin, it'd be a great opportunity. I just got registered. I could stay with Jim Holiday in Sarasota, or I could start my own firm. And we chose to start my own practice. And I said, if it doesn't work out, I can always go work somewhere. So in August of 1980, we formed Johnson Peterson Architects, and I've been in private practice ever since then.
The couple moved to Tallahassee to begin their adventure. The firm flourished. As Guy was developing his firm, he and Cindy were also starting their family. Their son, Nolan Wesley Peterson, was born on April 24, 1982, and 4 years later, Drew David Peterson on July 28, 1986.
He was always right there to be with his sons and took an immense amount of time with them. No matter how busy he was, he would take the time to be with them.
I wanted to give them as much time as I could. I love fatherhood, I still do, and it was, one of the greatest opportunities and privileges I've ever had is to raise our two sons.
Both Nolan and Drew received scholarships to the U.S. Air Force Academy and have served their country in Afghanistan and the Ukraine. Today, Nolan is a journalist serving as a war correspondent in the Ukraine. Drew now works for Goldman Sachs in New York City. The two of them continue to reach out to assist the world community.
They have started their own foundation. They've now gotten a 501c3 foundation, and they're raising funds to help families on the front lines of conflict. And they're rebuilding a library in the Ukraine, and they are supporting 120 refugees in Ukraine right now.
In 1985, Guy's mentor, Jim Holiday, became seriously ill. He asked Guy if he and Ivan would be interested in merging with his firm in Sarasota. Along with Jim's son Michael, who had just joined the firm out of college, they formed Johnson, Peterson, and Holiday, with offices in Sarasota and Tallahassee.
And after 4 years of that, we had two sons now in Tallahassee, and Cindy and I were feeling the need to put the sand between our toes again. And after 9 years of practicing as Johnson Peterson, we made the decision to move back to Sarasota and work out of the Sarasota office, which was what Michael really wanted, because his wife was from California and they wanted to go back to California. So he left the firm and I took over the Sarasota practice, and went back to Johnson Peterson Architects in 1989. And then we did that for another decade, and then in 2000 we dissolved Johnson Peterson Architects. Very amicably, but I was doing mostly residences and Ivan was still doing a lot of more public work, and it just didn't make sense to have this double office anymore. So I started Guy Peterson Office for Architecture.
Throughout his career in Sarasota, Guy has become a sought-after, award-winning architect. His work is notable for its clean lines and modernistic approach. He has been credited with recapturing and redirecting efforts toward an authentic Florida architecture. Among his many high-profile projects are the restoration and addition of Paul Rudolph and Ralph Twitchell's 1949 Revere Quality House on North Siesta Key, the Spencer House on South Orange Avenue, and the Krause House on Siesta Key.
A lot of his work is hidden more on the barrier islands and stuff and not as visible, but the whole body of work and the continuum is what really makes it significant. He's not a flash in the pan, man. He's been here for the long run.
Along with his residential designs, he has also devoted his talents to nonprofit community projects and commercial endeavors such as the Girl Scouts and Sarasota Memorial Hospital Critical Care Center.
I've had the pleasure of being heading up the building committee for the Girl Scouts. What I thought was fascinating, and it's indicative of all his work, is that it's extremely well organized. There's a flow, there's a reason for the spaces being where they are, and it's still a piece of art, the building itself.
Every time I drive to work and every time I go home, I pass the hospital. And that particular portion of the hospital abutting US 41 is a Guy Peterson design. Guy was the architect on that. And I really think that set the bar for the rest of the hospital development. It went from something that was pedestrian, it was all right, to something that's really remarkable.
You essentially create from a blank sheet of paper an idea about what this space building is going to be. And then you work with the client, and I'm speaking mostly about houses now because that's primarily what I do. And then you develop and refine the design. It's easy to add stuff, but it's hard to take stuff away. And that's kind of been my goal in my career. I had a really wonderful honor. I had a monograph of my work book come out last year, and it's called Naked, the Architecture of Guy Peterson. And it's not naked to be provocative, but naked in the sense that it's the idea of undressing of architecture. And naked is something that is obviously, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but if you're naked, one thing about being naked is it's honest. And I think that's the, kind of one of the philosophies and directions that I've continued to try and explore as I get older and more mature in my work.
In 2008, Guy was asked to teach a graduate class in design for a semester at the University of Florida in Gainesville. It opened a new passion in him to share his knowledge with the next generation of architects. At the end of that session, he offered his services on a more permanent basis.
It's another part of being an architect, at least for me, of doing something that's a little bit outside my comfort zone. And I think I look back on it, and I think it's made me a better architect. It's kept me fresh, and I find great inspiration from these uncontaminated minds that I teach.
That dedication to giving back has encompassed pro bono work for nonprofit organizations and bringing the University of Florida to Sarasota as a part of the Sarasota Center for Architecture, founded by Guy's wife Cindy, who obtained a master's degree in library science in archival management and dedicated herself to archiving the rich history of Sarasota and Florida's architects.
Cindy raised well over $1 million, started a 501c3, restored it, and she's been recognized by AIA Florida with the Bob Graham Architectural Awareness Award, which is the highest award they give to a non-architect. And just this last year, or just this year in 2016, she was awarded honorary membership in AIA for her contributions to the profession.
The Sarasota Center for Architecture is located in the restored Scott Building and provides a museum-quality exhibition space and lecture hall with state-of-the-art communication and presentation technologies. The renovation was completed by the Guy Peterson Office for Architecture, and the builder was Michael K. Walker and Associates.
It brings the next generation here, hopefully to stay. It highlights Sarasota's rich architectural history, as well as keeping the modern movement alive and the new fresh minds that are coming with the new students every year.
Over the course of his career, Guy Peterson has received more than 80 honors and awards, including the American Institute of Architects Florida Caribbean's highest honor, the Gold Medal. While they are significant honors to his work, Guy believes the architectural process is more than simply creating a building.
I'd rather do a building someone didn't like than a building they didn't notice. And I say that because architecture is important, and I think it's part of our landscape. And if you do a project and people stop and think about it and try to understand it or wonder, then I think you've done your job. If you do a project that nobody even sees or notices, then it seems a little bit like a missed opportunity. And I think, architecture to me is an art form. It's sculpture with useful function. But I think if you advance it and keep building on it, it's how we measure. It's a benchmark for our civilization, really, architecture. People go to Italy, they go to look at the architecture, the ancient, the Renaissance. It's a snapshot in time.
We ask Guy Peterson his advice for those who follow.
I've thought about this many years. That book by Robert Fulghum about everything I ever needed to know I learned in kindergarten. And I think if I could offer advice, I think the lessons you learn there, no matter what you do for your vocation, to learn to tell the truth, say thank you, thank others, learn to share, be polite, are all really things that I think are a measure of success in how you tackle your life and your career. Again, I would say be passionate with what you do. Pick something that you absolutely love, and I think success will be a much easier opportunity. There's no perfect job in the world. There's no job without stress. People say, you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. Well, it's always work for everybody, but working every day in your life is a lot more pleasant when you do love what you do.